Hello coders, welcome to episode 180, what? 137. 137 of the How to Code Well podcast. It is live as it is every week, as you can probably guess. I've already screwed up. It's episode 137, not 187, 137. It is Thursday the 25th of 2021, and today we're going to be talking, it's going to be mostly centered around PHP. Today we're going to be talking about PHP 8, the new stuff in PHP 8. We're going to be talking about various things to do with the PHP Foundation, new things that's happened with that, which is I'm finding very interesting. It's an exciting time to be a PHP dev right now. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of interesting things that are happening. Before we get into that, though, let's talk about the changelog. So the latest YouTube short that I've been doing one every week. So the latest one is the null safe operator in PHP 8, and it's 60 seconds long, and it will teach you that feature. And I'm planning to do a whole bunch more. In fact, this weekend I'm actually planning to record the 4 for December. So if you've got any suggestions on what to do with those, then please let me know. The feedback that I've had so far on the shorts have been fantastic, and it's encouraging me to do more and more. So they're coming through. Okay, also on the PHP logging course, the course that we've been building on the Tuesday show, this is the Tuesday's live stream, that is pretty much, dare I say, code complete. We are now PHP Stan level 9. We have the CSS in place. We've got the pages in place. We've got the session handling in place. It's good. It teaches a login. So you would log in with particular credentials. There's a secure area that you can't access unless you're logged in. It teaches a very sort of beginner-friendly approach to that kind of challenge, as well as teaching the project setup. So we're using PHP Stan, as I've mentioned before, PHP Unit, there's unit tests, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of TDD in there too. It's going to be good. It's going to be a good course, I feel. And what I've done is I've created a sort of a markdown file for every single lesson, and that is what I'm going to be plowing through or writing up in the next few weeks. And I'm hoping that the downtime period between Christmas and New Year, I'm actually going to do some recording of those. I reckon it's going to be about 10-ish lessons, although that can change as we go through. So I'm hoping to do all that by maybe the end of the year, and then release it early on next year. Now, something about that is that what I would like to do is sort of change tack, if you will, on the howtocodewell.net website. I'm struggling. I'm going to say it now. I'm struggling to build the subscription site, just because subscriptions are very difficult to build. And what I'm thinking of doing is maybe changing tact, and instead of doing a subscription site, I'm possibly going to be doing, and this is still up in the air, but I'm possibly going to be building just a shop, so you can buy these courses like a one-off hit, and then the subscriptions will be coming later. The thing is that there's a lot of things that I would need to do anyway in order to get that shopping cart sort of process done to have the subscription. So it kind of makes sense to go in that sort of direction rather than struggle as I am with the subscription side of things, because there's a lot of other things that you have to take into account when you're dealing with subscriptions and stuff like that. So that is probably where I'm going to focus on the Twitch live streams, on the weekend streams, is I'm going to probably be focusing more on building a shopping sort of experience on the howtocodewell.net site rather than a subscription experience. This also as I've been doing this has also made me think about the future courses ahead, and I've already sort of got an idea for what the next course will be. What I would like to do is, on the Tuesday show, is just keep planning courses live on YouTube, And so I see it like a conveyor belt, as in once I've finished coding one course, I'm going to start coding another course. And then in the background, sort of, I will have, give myself some time to record those and then push them out sort of when they're all ready. And then when the site is ready as well, hopefully it will all sort of come together. Who knows? So there's that. Yeah, so it's not that I'm dropping the subscription service. It's that I'm pivoting to building the shopping cart. Sort of, you buy a course, and then in the future I would bringing in that sort of the monthly, yearly subscription tier to allow everybody to actually access all the premium courses. I was asked a couple of times on the YouTube comments, when can you have, even one actually asked for lifetime access. So I am aware that there is people after it. It's just I'm struggling as a developer to develop it with the time constraints that I've got at the moment. You know, this isn't something I do full time, so I have to take that into consideration. Okay, whoo! Thank you for joining, Martin. I appreciate it. Who did the thumb down? Oh, I don't know. I don't really care. Hey, Jesse, thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate it. So, okay, let's talk about some PHP news. There is some interesting news going forward. Actually, let's do the questions and comments first. Let's do that first, and then I'll do the news. Let me see if I can find those. So I've picked out 2 questions from the YouTube comments, and Ramsey writes in and says, in the Docker environment variables tutorial that I've done, he asks, what is the path inside the Ubuntu image that has the variables such as doc_root? Where are they set? So the doc_root is sort of specific, I believe, to, I think it's Nginx or Apache. It's a web server thing. And those variables would be created by that application. Now you can find those variables out using something called a command, which is print_env. So when you get into the image, if you type print_env, all one word, press enter, and it'll come out with all the environment variables that are on that server image. As to where they are, as in where they're set, it really depends on the application. So because you're talking about Docker, you can actually alter the environment variables that are set by those web applications. I do this quite a bit. So for instance, if I wanted to alter the Apache document root, I would override the Apache document root environment variable with an environment variable of my own choosing. And you can do that through, say, Docker Compose, or just a build argument, if you will, when you're building the Docker image. So that's how you would manipulate those things via Docker. As to where they are, again, it really depends on what application you're playing with. I know you've mentioned a couple of here. Mode, I don't know what mode would be. Environment variable, it really depends on how that's been set. Doc_root sounds like a web server environment variable, so I would look for those kind of things. They get set whenever when the application is installed. There is obviously, as you mentioned, a path variable. So that path variable would have, it's essentially a path, which I believe is it a semicolon delimited string, where you can set application paths, so paths to other applications on the system. Also, you could set this in, say, your shell settings, and that would be, say, if you're using bash. This is thinking using the gray matter here. So this would be a bash rc, so .bash rc, it's a dot file. I use Z shell, for instance, so that would be a .z shell. You can set those environment variables in there if you want. Again, you could do this through Docker, so you could actually just pass in a .bash rc into that as a file. You know, you could bind mount that if you wanted to, or copy that over to the Docker image and use and do that. But make sure that if you do change the bash rc or the ZRC, what I use, the then what you want to do is source that change to the current shell. So you would literally type source and then the path to that RC file, and that will basically evaluate all of those changes to the current shell. If you don't do that, you would have to log out and log back in or create another shell. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I'm going to mispronounce this name, but Hammer Das writes in on the copy files from one container to another. These are Docker questions. Hats off to everybody using Docker. I love it. So on the copy files from one container to the other, the question is, hi, great tutorial, if I can spit it out. I'm facing an issue. I have built a, whoops, sorry. Where's that gone? Here we go. Sorry, I pressed the button. So let me start that again. As you can tell, this is live. Hammer Das asks, I'm facing an issue. I have built a Docker image that creates several CSV files and stores them in a tarball. Okay. However, when I use Docker CP after running the image, it does not find the tarball. How do I retrieve the file? Okay, so there's a couple of things in there. Again, it's one of these questions where I would really need to see your setup in order to actually sort of navigate and sort of direct you into the solution, I guess. But from that, what I've got here is that you've created a Docker image that creates CSV files and stores them in a tarball. So it stores them in the container. That's from what I've got from that sentence. So it stores it in the container. Okay, fine. However, when I use the Docker CP, so when you're copying from that container or out of that container, you're not able to retrieve the tarball. So the thing there is that you might want to use like a bind mount instead of just putting it into the container. As soon as you drop the container, you're going to drop the data in that container. This catches me out quite a bit. So when you create a Docker container, when you add files to that container, when you remove that container, those files are removed, even though you have an image, right? So you'll build the container from the image, and then anything above and beyond or added to that container once it's built gets removed, gets deleted as soon as you drop the container. So if I'm reading between the lines here, it sounds as though what you've done is you've created a Docker image that when you spin it up, it builds up these CSV files in a tarball, and then you come out of that container and then you try and do a Docker CP to get that stuff, but the container sounds, I need to see this in practice, but it sounds like the container has been dropped, and then you create the container again and you can't access it's a bit of a stretch there, I know, but it sounds as though you've got a problem where it's not actually saving it, persisting it. Now you can't, if it's in a container, you would have to persist it back to, or persist the file back to the Docker image, and that would give you another image layer. But I think the easiest way to get around this issue is to create a bind mount. That is, you're basically saying that this part of the host machine is shared to this image, to this container, and therefore you can see the images being created on the host machine from the container. That's how I would do it. I wouldn't rely on Docker CP like the way you're doing it. I would create a bind mount to say that this file, this folder on the host machine can have access, write and read access to this other area on the Docker container. I have done videos on that. If you, I can't remember what they're called, but I've done videos on that in that playlist that you are in that video of, on bind mounts as well. So there's bind mounts, and then there's Docker volumes. Docker volumes are slightly different because Docker volumes are they're parts. They're a Docker object that is persisted after the Docker container is removed, and then when you create the container again, it then reattaches you can reattach the Docker volume to that. Whereas a bind mount is actually, you're saying that this part of the host machine is available to the container and has read and write access and other accesses that you can specify and stuff, and so you can actually see files. This is how we build and develop websites using Docker, is that you would bind mount, say, your application to the container, and therefore you can change on the host machine. If you've got VS Code or PHP Storm, you would point that to that folder in the host machine. You would change that, and it would be reflected on the container. In fact, it's a one-to-one because you're sharing that. So that's what I would do. Create a bind mount, test that out. Okay, let's move on to some news. So, PHP news. This is some interesting stuff has happened recently. Some very interesting stuff. So I guess what we'll do is we'll talk about some PHP 8.1 goodness. I think that's pretty cool. So PHP 8.1 has been released today. 8.1, it has active support until November the 25th, 2023, so next year. And it has security support all the way up to the 25th of November 2024. So this is a minor release of PHP 8, PHP 8.1, but it does include a ton of interesting core little features. And yes, you bet your bottom dollar that I'm going to be doing PHP shorts on some of these, especially enums. I am so excited that enums are coming in. I have, as a PHP dev, what I tend to do with my enums, which is, I guess you could kind of class it as a bit of an anti-pattern, is I would create like a constants class, and in that constants class I would create some constants that have certain things, and then I would sort of create another class that kind of mimics an enum. It's just not nice, but you would have an array of constants, and then you would do some sort of switchy type craziness on that, whereas the enums would solve all that issues. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's a step in the right direction. There's also this thing that I've never really played with. It's called green threads or fibers. Now this is weird. It's going to be used in things like React PHP, which I must admit I've never played with React PHP, not at all. I don't really know what it is, to be honest, but it sounds as though it's going to be something to do with threading. It sounds as though it's going to have something to do with parallelism or something like that. I don't really know, but that would be it'd be interesting to play with. I may do that on stream one day. I may play with React PHP one day because I do feel like I should know it. I should at least have experienced React PHP. Another thing that's coming into play is read-only properties. So that you can create a class with read-only properties, meaning that you can only read them and you cannot write them. So for instance, you could have a public read-only property and you could read it publicly, but you can't write to it. This would be very good for DTOs or classes that define certain configuration. Again, I go back to my crazy constants classes where you have a huge class full of lots of constants, and then you have an array map of all those things. The read-only ones would be really, really good. Okay, there's also op cache performance and lots of other little changes in, well, it's not little, lots of changes in PHP 8.1. So I do recommend going to check out the changelog. There is a really good blog, Stitcher.io, that talks about all of the different features of all of the different new versions, and goes into some really great detail and some depth. So go check that out as well. Make sure that you do test your code before you upgrade the stuff, and also make sure you check any other the BC breaks as well. Okay, so that's going in one direction. 8.1 has been released, and it's improving PHP really, really well. PHP 7.4, on the other hand, it loses active support in 3 days. So on the 28th of November 2021, it will no longer receive active support. This is PHP 7.4. It will have a security support for a further year, but really you got to think about coming off of 7.4 in my opinion, and moving to 8 as soon as you possibly can. Because the thing is, it's one of those things that you're like, oh yeah, I'll do it, but then it comes to, like, you know, one day turns into 1 week, 1 week turns into 3 weeks, 3 weeks turns into 6 weeks, 6 weeks turns into 6 months, and before you know it, you've lost support. So if you haven't done so already, make sure that you've got an upgrade path from PHP 7.4 all the way up to PHP 8 and 8.1. I think that you'll be kicking yourself if you haven't got an upgrade plan. You'll certainly be kicking yourself if you don't have any tests. But yes, that's really good. It's good that we're shaking the chains off of the old stuff and moving on to the new stuff. I'm really digging what's coming out in PHP 8. Also, talking about versions, let's stick on versions for a minute. Microsoft is going to discontinue, I think I've mentioned this before, but Microsoft is going to discontinue Windows builds of PHP 8, or of PHP. So I was a little confused by this. This is an article by the techrepublic.com. It's I was a little bit confused because I was like, oh my God, Microsoft is just not supporting PHP anymore. Well, that's kind of untrue. If you read the article, so Microsoft will be contributing. Well, sorry, Microsoft will stop contributing. This is off of their article. Windows builds of the popular PHP scripting language PHP 8 and beyond. The announcement was made, well, then there's a date, so it was made a while ago, that support for PHP 7.2 will end in November, and PHP 7.3 will go into security fix mode. So this was, I think this is a bit old, this article, because that's already done. But what they're doing is they're saying that once PHP 8 comes out, they are no longer going to be creating builds for PHP in the Microsoft world, in the Windows world. There is a windows.php.net, and that is basically what is going away. There was a post on Reddit that talks about this and gives a little bit more context, which I do appreciate, because I was a little confused when I read this. So for the possibility of missing context, Microsoft runs windows.php.net and produces all the official builds of PHP Windows. If you run, say, php.exe or mod_php7.dll, or anything like that, for instance, then what you're actually doing is running code that Microsoft or Windows have created to support the build. Now, in my opinion, I think that's someone's just going to take that on, or it's going to be automated. It's going to be automatically built. So there'll be a server somewhere that just builds this stuff. So, which kind of makes sense in my opinion. So it's less of a scary move in my opinion. Plus the fact that you can use Linux in PHP and then, you can use Linux in Windows, and then you could just install it like that. You know, why not? Why not? That makes sense to me. So it's not a earth-shaking piece of news. It's just something to be aware of. I think when you're on a Windows box and you're thinking about installing PHP, it's not going to be now from windows.php.net. It's going to be from somewhere else, or you'll be doing it through Linux anyway. That's how I would do it. I wouldn't be relying on Windows anyway to do any of that stuff, but I'm not a Windows dev, so I would say that, wouldn't I? Anyway, moving on, moving swiftly on to the PHP Foundation. Now, this is some really awesome news. This is some really, really awesome news. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just go over to the JetBrains blog. JetBrains, by the way, if you don't know, JetBrains, they create PHP Storm, the IDE of my choice. I've been using PHP Storm for a number of years, and they have announced that they're going to be creating, yes, they're going to be creating the PHP Foundation. And this is really exciting news for PHP developers, I think, going forward. And it's, I think it should have been done a while ago, to be honest. But I guess it's one of those things that it just takes a bit of time to get the ball rolling. It also takes a lot of input from a lot of other parties and discussion, and there's a little bit of fear, perhaps. The skeptical of you could go, oh, if there's a foundation, this means governance, and if there's governance, this means rules. But really, I actually think that this is the best thing PHP. Apart from moving to PHP 8, this is the best thing that's happened to PHP in the last good few years. There is a bit of sad news to this, of course, and that is that Nikita is switching focus from PHP. I'm just reading the post here. So Nikita started working on PHP in 2011 when he was still in high school, and he made his first contribution to PHP 5.5. That's a long time ago. During 10 years, where are we? 10 years in the PHP world, Nikita implemented all sorts of bugs and all sorts of features and bug fixes, improvements. We owe a lot to Nikita, a lot, and it's sad to see that he is switching focus and will eventually be doing less in the PHP space. Which is a bit sad, and I guess it's a little bit, dare I say, a little bit frustrating, shall we say, that the foundation is coming out of being born now and not when Nikita was working on PHP so much. You got to think, sometimes you got to think, what would have happened. What else would have happened with the support of the foundation? Because this foundation has all sorts of things that could become a benefit to the PHP community going forward. One of which is being financial support to PHP, actually being able to fund people writing, the core team members actually writing PHP, improving PHP, and I think that is crucial. It's crucial. PHP is used by so many things. So many things rely on PHP. If PHP fails, then we have all sorts of problems. But it requires some dedicated team of loads of people, as well as core members who dedicate their life's work to PHP. They have been, and there are so many maintainers, just a countless amount of people who have built packages, who have pushed PHP forward, who have been answering tickets and questions and GitHub comments and all sorts of things, at the early hours of the morning, giving up their weekends, and it's a complete thankless task. And it's a task that we just assume will happen because we're just so used to having the open source community to support us in the things that we do. And let's be clear, building websites is actually an incredibly profitable thing. I mean, I get paid a lot. And I'm pretty sure you get paid a lot. It's a very difficult thing to do, web development. It's a very challenging thing to do. But it's one of those things that relies on a lot of people doing all sorts of crazy hours, all sorts of crazy support in a very unthankful way. So it's like for instance, I am the first to admit that I'll just assume that all the big major players, all the major frameworks of PHP, all the major libraries will eventually become PHP 8 compatible. Well, someone has to do the work. And if that person is doing the work on the weekend because it's something that they're, dare I say, a hobby or a passion, it takes time away from life, and then they have an obligation to make that happen, to do those things, and to upgrade and improve their packages in line with PHP, because it's this never-ending churn of work. Anyway, enough of that, because that was going down a bit of a ranty hole. Let's just focus a little bit on Nikita, because there's a portion of this blog post, and I will put it in the show notes below, about the bus factor. So losing one of the main contributors to PHP is a blow to the community, because he is the bearer of knowledge and expertise. It puts the language that powers 78% of the web in a fragile position, not to mention an overwhelming burden on the maintainer, which unfortunately in the world of open source software often leads to people burning out, which is what I was trying to get at in my sort of, weird roundabout rant there. There was support, additionally Zend by Preforce has committed to PHP and contributed key initiatives to the PHP language for more than 20 years. So there has been a lot of support by Zend as well, that we kind of need to mention as well. So including PHP 5 object model, the opcache code, the PHP 7 engine, and the JIT compiler. So yeah, quite a lot of change and improvements there. By continuing to fund full-time and part-time developers on the project, Zend has helped ensure the ongoing prosperity and modernization of the PHP language. Again, reading from this article here, and it's continued to use mission critical and its continued use for mission critical application development. We are proceeding rather than leisurely thinking that the problem was not critical. However, Nikita's decision forced us to intensify our work on the foundation. So the foundation has been an idea for a while, but because of the decision of Nikita to move on, the foundation has been brought forward. That's what I'm reading here, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. If the news was to break separately, people would be freaking out. If the news that Nikita was going to step down happened, and then nothing else happened, like there was no foundation, nothing, people would start freaking out, in my opinion. This is just showing that there is a safety net. It's all good. It's all good. So after numerous conversations with members of the community, as well as a number of companies that have vested interests in PHP, we are glad to announce that the following companies will be joining forces to form a PHP Foundation. This is Automatic, Laravel, Acquia, which is Drupal, Zend, Private Packagist, Symfony, Craft CMS, Tideways, PrestaShop, and JetBrains. So this is like our core sort of team members, right, of the PHP Foundation. I mean, you can't ask for better than this, right? We got Laravel, we got Symfony, check. We've got Tideways, check. We've got Craft CMS, Private Packagist, all sorts of Zend, Acquia, all sorts of good companies and communities there. And I think that is such a good position to be in, I think. And people should be seeing this as an extremely positive move in the PHP world. If anybody says PHP is dead, they just point them to this blog post and go, no, it's not. It's far from from dead. Okay, so to get off a faster start and to reap the benefits of the foundation right away, we have decided to do it via the Open Collective. So opencollective.com/PHP Foundation. Open Collective is a foundation as a service provider that handles the legal and accounting aspects. Open Collective is trusted by many open source projects, including Vue.js, Open Web Docs, Webpack, and the Yi frameworks, as well as many, many more. With the projected donations from all participating companies so far, we expect to raise about $300,000 per year. Okay, let me say that again. With the projected donations from all participating companies so far, we expect to raise about $300,000 per year. JetBrains intends to contribute $100,000 annually. Woo! We expect to be able to pay the market salaries to PHP core developers. The more we collect, the more developers will be able to work full-time on PHP. So if I'm really excited about PHP 8 right now, which I am, how excited am I going to be in the next few years when this foundation starts taking off and actually starts bringing core developers, paying core developers for their time and for their effort and for their energy, and not only core developers but people part of the PHP community as well. So a little bit about the governance and administration here. So initially, a temporary administration will be put in place, with the composition of the permanent administration to be decided once the foundation is up and running. The temporary administration will facilitate the establishment of the foundation's rules and bylaws. The temporary administration will include representatives of sponsors and a group of PHP fellows. Okay, so there is already a core group of people who will be overseeing sort of the temporary handover, or not handover, the temporary transition into having more of a formal administration of this. I think this is really good. I really believe that this is a very good way forward. I'm not going to read the whole article at all. I'll put a link in the show notes below. And I think that this is an amazing way forward. One thing I will end on, though, is that if you want to follow more information about the PHP Foundation, then you can do so by following their Twitter handle. This is at the PHPF. So the PHP Foundation. So at the PHPF. Also, if you would like to support them, then do so via the Open Collective. So that's opencollective.com/PHP Foundation. And of course, I will be putting links in the show notes as well. So yeah, I think that PHP is in a very strong position. I think it's very sad, obviously, that Nikita has gone, or will be having that slow transition away from PHP onto other things. But I do believe that this is pushing PHP forward. And that is a really good thing. And I'm very excited to know where PHP will improve and evolve due to this. I think that's really good. And I think that having the ability to fund developers who do build PHP, I think is great, because that's something that we've been crying out for. We need to help our maintainers. We need to support them. We can't just be very greedy all the time and just sort of, expect things to happen. Expect support for older versions of PHP, of packages that we have. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be expecting them, but we do, because that's what we do, because that's open source, and that's what happens. Anyway, that's it. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everybody. I will be live this weekend. It's either going to be Saturday or Sunday. I'll let you know via Twitter at HowToCodeWell. If you've got any comments, questions, or suggestions on other topics of the show, or if you've got any suggestions for, say, the PHP shorts, then do get in touch. Go to howtocodewell.fm/contact. You can fill out that contact form there. You can either do a private message, or you could do a public message if you want that message read out on the show. Or if you've just got a comment or a question about any kind of web dev stuff, always happy to help. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Goodbye.